they've been taught that this is a constant, right? The last term by itself is a constant. But when we start talking about terms, is that still a constant? And that's where we have to look at, is there a variable there? Is it m to the 0? And that's why it's not there. So I just made a note. What is the coefficient if there's nothing written in front of the variable? So, and then the power 1, 2 on the negative 10m, right here, right? We know that the coefficient is negative 10 and the variable is m, but what is the power? Is it m to the 1? Right? And so there's 1m. I'm not exactly sure how we want to present this to them. Because they're not gonna, I don't think they're gonna relate that this is a coefficient. Right? They're gonna call it a constant. And so they're gonna say, well, we don't have a coefficient there. We don't have a variable. So I can see them putting nuns here.
And we had, because we talked about this at that training, because this is the lesson we did. How are we gonna deal with that? Do we want to introduce what we talked about, or do we want to allow them to not to put NA here?
Because
where's the conversation?
this is the, we know, right, going into this lesson that anything to the 0 power is 1.
Right.
However,
so this is 1, which makes that,
where that last topic that we rearranged with laws of exponents is coming into play. They don't have this prior knowledge, and they don't get that in math 2 or math 1 about a 0 exponent.
So is this the time to introduce that? That's an instructional decision for you guys.
I think they're fine with, excuse me. Man, my voice is gonna go.
I know.
I think that they're fine with the exponent of 1.
This one should be okay, right?
I think they're great with the exponent of 1. That's going to be not an issue because they're already in front of the m, the first term, there's a coefficient of 1, right? They know how to put in 1s there. Some of them also know if it's not there that they can substitute the 0, right? You might connect that to.
My concern is, though, none of them are gonna know there's an M there. I don't think.
I don't think so either.
Even though they know if there's nothing there, I can put a 0, right? They're not gonna know that there is a variable there.
Because they've never seen it.
Because they've never seen anything.
Is it important for the rest of this topic that they know that a 0 exponent is the same thing as 1? How much more is that going to come into play? Because we know that it's going to come in with laws of exponents.
Right, and I think, that could be a teaching moment. Just have them pull out the graphing calculator and just give them a value and put anything to the power of 0.
Here?
Yeah, why not?
Because we don't want to teach it where we don't show them that it's a coefficient and a variable there, because then we got to reteach what we
You gotta undo.
and
redo.
Yeah.
When you get to that point.
So,
So is it valuable to have that brief discussion here? Not to where it's the whole class period and we're spending 20 minutes on this one discussion, but to have that quick discussion of this is what it looks like. Or do you wait till exponents?
I think we wait, only because I don't foresee it being a brief discussion. And I feel like to me, it's confusing to all of a sudden throw this in after for however many weeks we've been doing this, that's been a constant.
I don't think it is, because when we're getting into teaching polynomials, and there's a point to where you're gonna have to explain that they have to write it in order of highest degree. And so they need to understand that the first term is to the 3rd power, 2nd power, 1st power, and that's why the constant is last, because it's to the power of 0.
So, I only wrote one thing off to the side there. Will you write this next to it? And I can just do it. Here, I just wrote 5m to the 0 power. Right next to it.
Here?
No, under power. Next to power, yeah. I wrote 5m to the 0 power, and then I drew an arrow. Yeah, and then I wrote 5 times 1, with parentheses, equals 5. So just by doing that, that's explaining what happens, right? We're substituting m of 0 is 1. That's where I substituted that. I think if I do that, it will take a couple minutes to explain it. For coming to take some time to meet with me. I want to talk about our most recent PLC that we had, and specifically the protocol that we're using, the lesson rehearsal protocol, and see how is that influencing your practices in PLC, your practices in your classroom, and your team's collaboration overall.
Okay.
So I wrote out a couple questions for us to go over, and we can talk about ones, and at the end, if there's anything else you want to bring to the table, like let's for sure discuss that. So one of the first couple things I want to talk about is how do you think the lesson rehearsal protocol specifically influences your classroom instruction? Like how is it influencing your craft as a teacher?
Okay. So I really think that taking the time to rehearse the lesson before we come into to present it to my students really benefits my instructional practices, because I feel like I come prepared. I feel like rather than having to use one of my classes as my practice class or guinea pig class, I'm able to use my cohorts as my guinea pigs in my practice, and so I feel like I'm able to stand up at the board and kind of have a preset idea of what my students are going to respond and their errors that they're going to make and things like that, so I'm ready to tackle that right from the beginning rather than being put on the spot and not expecting an error or a response or a misconception and then having to go back and kind of regroup and rethink on the fly. I kind of already have in the back of my mind what I'm expecting my students to say, what I'm expecting them to make their errors on, and the questions that I'm going to have to ask them as I go through the lesson to have them be successful from the beginning.
So I wrote down a couple things. So what I hear you saying is that this protocol helps you feel prepared, so there's no unexpected things coming at you in class. You know if there's going to be any misconceptions and how you can target those.
Exactly.
And I thought one thing that you pointed out was kind of important, because we wanted the goal of this to make sure that your first teach is the best teach.
Right.
And so like you said, there's no guinea pig class. You've already rehearsed this, you know what's happening and things like
Exactly. And I feel like in the past, there's your first class is your guinea pig class, and so that's where you make mistakes. Your students are saying things that catch you off guard, or they're responding in ways that you're not prepared to answer, and you kind of have to come back and think about it. And so as you go through your next class, you're ready and you're prepared, and they get the best of the lesson, but your first class doesn't always. And so I like that my first class gets the best lesson, even though they're my first class. Yeah.
That led into the second one there. It says, how does it influence student success? So you've kind of alluded to that, saying, students are already ensuring that they are getting the best out of this lesson. You've pre-planned your questions, you've pre-planned your timing. Anything else you want to add to that for just student success and how this protocol implement helps them?
I think the fact that I know my students well and that I'm able to know what kind of errors they typically make, and knowing the content and knowing in the past where our students have made errors kind of allows me, like I said, to be prepared for those misconceptions and already say, like, in the past, this is what I've seen students do, so I want to make sure that you guys know up front, like, if this is something that you're doing, this is how you can fix it, or things like that, so that they're not making those errors, so they feel successful from the beginning. Because I feel like if you come with them and they don't feel successful from the beginning because it's a difficult concept or whatever the case may be, they're already at a point where they're not willing to accept and to learn, because they already kind of have in their mindset that, oh, I already messed up, and so how am I going to fix it now?
Absolutely.
So being able to address that from the beginning and letting them know, like, this is something that all students make at the beginning, and we're going to address it right from the beginning, and so they're set up for success from the very introduction of what we're going to be doing for their lesson.
And
So-
that's because you were already planned and you've rehearsed.
Exactly,
Like that.
and we kind of discussed it as a group in our pre-planning and our model teach and things like that. So.
Absolutely. So thank you for taking time to talk with me about this process and being 100% open about it. One of the questions here says, do you feel comfortable to share at your PLC? I know you've worked with your algebra team for a couple of years now, and so y'all have had a previous, connection with each other. However, we're starting to implement this new protocol. So how has that changed, and do you still feel comfortable? What is that protocol like with your team?
So yes, I feel completely comfortable whether I'm doing the lesson that day or somebody else is doing the lesson. I feel comfortable to share, if they're up there and we're getting into a situation where maybe I think I would present it to my kids a little bit different, or anything like that, I have no problems speaking up and sharing that. I think part of the reason that all of us feel comfortable sharing is that we have our PLC norms, and so we've made it a point to let everybody know there's no bad ideas. There's everybody kind of addresses everybody professionally. All thoughts are taken into consideration, and so if I'm up there and I already have it in my mind like how I'm going to present it, and then somebody else interjects and says maybe we should look at this, or maybe we need to revamp the way we're going to show it to our students or something like that. It's receptive, it's not judgy, it's not being critical, it's simply coming together as a team and using our norms to do what's best for our students. And so having that mindset and knowing that nobody's in there to pick on you or to be critical of you, and that we're just trying to come up with our best lesson that we can present to our classes, makes it easy for me to either present or to give feedback to the presenter at that time.
Do you feel like all people in your PLC group feel the same way, or even are quick to volunteer to do the lesson rehearsal, or is it a rotation basis, or how are you assessing?
So yeah, anybody's willing to volunteer and get up there and talk. I think pretty much everybody on our team has no issues with showing what they did. There's been times where somebody's model teaching and then somebody else is like, well, I kind of thought this, and so they'll jump in and it'll kind of be like a duo kind of thing, like, okay, let's talk about this, which is going to be better for our students. We do a rotation. We look at our calendar weekly and we say, okay, next week these are the lessons that we need to come prepared with. So we do those on our own time, and then we come back, and as we're working through them, we have already designated somebody who is going to be the person that is going to do the model teach the next week. And so that person then goes through and picks what they want or what they feel is the most important thing to address as a group. And that's what they come with. And then if somebody else has something else that they want to interject, or something else that maybe they were unsure of while they were working, then we try to find time to have that person come up and do their questions or whatever. Yeah. Or if this was a problem in your class, how did you write down that you were gonna project it, or things like that. So I feel like our team works really well together, and we're all willing to step up to the plate, but we also know, like, okay, next week is your week, and so I'm still going to work through my lessons, and I'm still going to come prepared, because I'm going to have questions, and I want to make sure that what you're doing aligns with what I'm doing, or maybe you have ideas that I didn't come up with, or whatever the case may be.
I think that's huge. What you're saying is, like, even though somebody else is doing the model teach, everybody still needs to come prepared with their lesson internalized, ready to go, to have that collaborative, because if somebody has not done the lesson, then you're just taking the person who's presenting at face value, because you don't know what it is.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think that is huge, to come prepared with your lesson already internalized and stuff ready to go.
Right.
You kind of alluded to it in your answer, but how does that person who's doing the model teach, or any other person, decide on what lessons to pick? Could you give like a specific, maybe something
the one that they're going to model teach?
Sure. How do they assess that? Do you have a calendar? Are you just going by the lessons, or what are they? So
we have a calendar already laid out. We do our quarter planning on a professional development day, and so we have a calendar laid out, and that calendar specifically says which lessons we're going to address that week with our students, right? So if we're doing quadratic equations or whatever, we know what we're going to be looking at that week having to do with quadratic equations. And then based on internalizing your lessons, so this week I know I need to do whatever, module 4, topic 2, lessons 1, 2, and 3. Mm-hmm. Right? That's what our students are going to get next week. So I internalize those lessons on my own time, and I go through and I work them all. And as I'm working them, for me personally, when it's my turn to model teach and I'm going to pick the lesson that I'm going to model teach, after I've internalized, I go back and I typically pick the one that I feel like my students are going to struggle with the most, that's going to be the hardest to present to my students. Yeah. And so then I take that lesson and I break it down, and that's the one that I'm going to present at that time when it comes time to model teach.
That's a perfect. Thank you for take the time to just go in depth and talk to me about how your team is using this protocol.
Absolutely.
I'm excited to see how other teams are also using the protocol so we can even be more aligned with this and all of our students across our campus can benefit from that. Yeah, thank you so much.
Absolutely.